the next big thing is heat recovery. So Bitcoin mining, it uses electricity and it converts that electricity to heat. That's basically what it does. And we do that for home heaters, for example. We pay for that. Bitcoin mining, the heat is often a negative thing. You don't know what to do with the heat. Now, if you can use the heat for a purpose, there's a hot tub place in New York that heats their hot tubs with Bitcoin miners. There's some of those African ones I mentioned, like they'll dry tea leaves because you have to dry them pretty quickly. They'll dry them with the heat generated by Bitcoin miners. Marathon is now they're one of the biggest miners in the world. They're now pretty seriously looking into heat recovery. So over time, not only does Bitcoin mining fall into the stranded energy parts, but then also in order to be the most competitive, and it's a very competitive field, you have to eventually figure out a way to use your heat as another revenue stream.
In this recent interview on Macrospotic with Lynn Alden, we learn about Bitcoin mining and the diverse global use cases for energy and heat utilization. Lynn explores the innovative ways Bitcoin miners are harnessing energy, from utilizing stranded natural gas to capturing waste heat for greenhouse operations. Lynn emphasizes how Bitcoin mining is driving efficiency in the energy sector, particularly in areas with excess energy production or where traditional infrastructure is lacking. Before we dive into this discussion, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this channel. Now let's hear more from Lynn Alden.
Now, what Bitcoin miners can do is that if you put Bitcoin miners on site, you can run that natural gas through, a generator and power the Bitcoin miners and at least pay yourself a couple cents a kilowatt for that spare energy. And running it through that converts the methane to carbon dioxide more efficiently than burning it. And so it's actually less greenhouse impactful and you make money from it. And yet World Bank shows that the amount of natural gas flared worldwide per year in terms of energy wasted is something like 8 times the size of Bitcoin's energy consumption.
Wow.
Just that. And what Bitcoin does, Bitcoin is, unlike a data center, Bitcoin can deal with low bandwidth and low uptime. It can go out to remote regions and just be wherever the energy is. So it's got that kind of flexible aspect to it. And electricity is by far the biggest cost of Bitcoin mining. There's obviously a little bit of hardware costs, there's a little bit of personnel costs, but by far the biggest piece is electricity. So they can go into any region and say, look, we just want your lowest electricity price. And we'll, if you need this to shut off for 2 hours a day, or you need to shut off whenever there's a demand spike or a supply cut, like we'll be the first to cut off because we have the flexibility to do that as long as we price in the lowest electricity when it's available. And so basically what it does is it fills in all the little nooks and crannies and inefficiencies in the system. And, in one given cycle, maybe too many Bitcoin miners go to some place and people complain, oh, look, all these Bitcoin miners. But those, if they stay in a place where there's not energy abundance, then it hurts their cost and they are less competitive than their peers. And so Bitcoin miners will disperse, and they have been dispersing to all the little pockets around where there's unused power. My favorite example is Gridless. There's a company in Gridless in Africa called Gridless, and especially in like the East African region, they go out to like untapped river hydro, and they build little mini hydro dams on little rivers, river hydro, and they mine Bitcoin with it. And in developing countries, there's been a chicken and the egg problem with energy infrastructure. It's really costly to build new power generation and transmission. And the people there need it, but it's like, how are you going to basically prove that you can put this much cost in and recoup your cost? And yet the people in the area can't develop without electricity. So you have a chicken and egg problem. How do you get started? So one of the ways to do it is you can build a new hydro dam and you can mine Bitcoin with it. That's like your anchor tenant. That's like your guaranteed initial tenant. Even if there's no other paying customers, Bitcoin is a paying customer as long as your electricity is cheap enough. And there's nothing cheaper than stranded energy. So they can build a hydro dam, they can mine Bitcoin with it. And as people in the surrounding area tap into that electricity, they can start to outprice the Bitcoin miners and they can start to take a larger share of that. And that's what we're seeing. And so you have towns in Africa that were not electrified, that because of a Bitcoin mining new hydro setup, that town now has electricity. And that's a real thing that's happening on the ground. It's been remarkable seeing it. So for example, In 2020, Stone Ridge produced a investor newsletter written by Ross Stevens, their CEO, and he talked about how he sees Bitcoin mining revolutionizing energy over time, and he specifically said African hydro would be like the best place for it. He's like, imagine, rivers in Africa that are all this untapped energy being tapped and basically creating electricity for these people. And at the time, that wasn't really happening yet. And yet, 2-3 years later, Gridless is doing it and increasing their scale of doing it. And there's other companies doing it as well. Another thing he mentioned back then was people right now, people settle around rivers and coasts and basically along transportation networks, and we bring the energy to us. That's how we've always done it. We go out and get the oil, we bring it to us. We go out and get any power source, we bring it to us. Whereas what Bitcoin mining allows you to do is go to where the energy source is, especially things like remote work. If it entices people to move to this river, move to this region, move to this geothermal area, and during the gold rush in the United States, you'd have people find gold, and then a town would sprout up. Someone has to. All those people that are mining, they need haircuts, they need restaurants, they need they need all these services. And the same thing can happen with Bitcoin mining. You have these like little pockets build up, and people can gravitate toward where there's naturally occurring energy that this can make use of it. And someone has to service the people running it, and someone has to service those people, and you have a little micro town build up and access power. I think basically Bitcoin just fills in all the inefficiencies, and it just takes several cycles to get there. And every time Bitcoin crashes in price and it squeezes out all the miners that have too expensive electricity, over time, only stranded energy makes sense economically. Drying something, heating something. And so I think we're going to see more and more of that. I mean, there's a company in France that's competing with heat pumps for heating homes with Bitcoin miners, and that's powerful. And it's funny because I was talking to one of the people from the company, and he's like, it costs there's more energy spent on heating French homes than the Bitcoin network. So people think of Bitcoin network as a big thing, but it's actually still small in the grand scheme of things. And it can just all these little energy efficiencies, it can just slip in there and find ways to make use of wasted energy.
As we just heard Lynn Alden discuss Bitcoin's impact on energy markets and infrastructure, now let's hear her thoughts on Bitcoin's role in the broader financial system. Lynn explains how Bitcoin serves as a unique monetary asset, offering a decentralized alternative to traditional currencies. She discusses its potential as a hedge against inflation and its growing adoption in countries facing economic instability. Lynn also touches on the geopolitical implications of Bitcoin, including its use in international settlements and its potential to challenge the dominance of the US dollar. Now let's listen to what Lynn Alden on the Macrospotic podcast has to say about Bitcoin's future prospects.
Right. So yeah, to summarize, Bitcoin is globally portable, censorship-resistant, self-custodial money. At least you have the option to self-custody it. And even compared to other cryptocurrencies, it's the biggest, most liquid, most secure one. So if you want to send $1 billion, overseas, Bitcoin's the one that can handle that kind of volume. And then there's network effects associated with that. The bigger it is, the more liquid it is, the more secure it becomes, which then makes people want to own it even more. And so price is an important indicator of adoption. It doesn't matter what happens on a 1, 2, 3 year basis, but certainly over, say, rolling 4-year periods, you want to see higher highs and higher lows in Bitcoin because that shows that adoption is happening. And like you said, volatility is important because what you want when an asset is small is you want upside volatility. You can't go from Bitcoin currently is worth about $1 trillion market cap, a little bit above that. And it went from 0 to $1 trillion in, something like the first 12 years it hit $1 trillion, then it was in a bear market. So now it's back to $1 trillion. You can't get that without upside volatility. And with upside volatility comes leverage and comes over-enthusement for a period of time. And that's what creates periods of downside volatility. So it can't get to whatever its total addressable market is without both directions of volatility. Now, once Bitcoin gets closer to whatever its total addressable market is, so for example, you think, what percentage of your liquid net worth do you want in a portable, like a globally portable, self-custodial, peer-to-peer money, like the best one? Probably a pretty significant percentage of like a liquid net worth. And right now, very small percentage of people even own any. The people that own some usually have a small percentage. And so I think it's still climbing in terms of its total adoption. I think eventually it's a multi-trillion-dollar network. I think it'll be bigger than any individual stock. And so until it's at that kind of higher mature phase, I think the volatility is going to be present. And as far as the overall Bitcoin, kind of the health of the Bitcoin network, one of the biggest ways I measure it, one is price and liquidity, but also it's kind of the network effect of the people involved. So all the different hubs that pop up. One of the first ones was Bitcoin Beach in El Salvador, and they eventually inspired the whole nation to kind of adopt it, or at least at the president level, and kind of slowly put it out to the rest of the country. Then we've seen, for example, Bitcoin Jungle in Costa Rica, Bitcoin Ikasi in South Africa. There's all these different hubs popping up, and we're in a hub right now, which is Bitcoin Atlantis. It's a good name because you're in an island, Madeira,
I love it,
in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. But what happened was a few years ago, a bunch of Bitcoin enthusiasts really kind of focused on this jurisdiction and said, let's create a little bit of a Bitcoin density here. That's what we're seeing play out now. That now, compared to a few years ago, from people that have been here during that time, a lot more merchants accept it, a lot more people hold it than they did a few years ago, and that's what you see in these different little hubs around the world. And so I think that as these hubs grow, that's healthy for the Bitcoin network.
As we wrap this discussion up with Lyn Alden on the Macrospotic podcast, Lyn Alden provides a comprehensive analysis of Bitcoin's multifaceted impact on energy markets, financial systems, and global geopolitics. She highlights the technology's potential to drive innovation in energy efficiency and offer financial alternatives in unstable economies. Here are 2 questions for our audience. How do you think Bitcoin mining will influence renewable energy adoption in the coming years? What potential challenges do you foresee for Bitcoin as it gains more mainstream acceptance? Thank you for tuning in to Only the Savvy. If you enjoyed this discussion, please subscribe, like, and share our video for more engaging content diving into the innovative world of decentralized technologies.